Hello, this is easy. Let me start with 2 anecdotes from my life. I'm going to introduce myself later. As a kid, I went for 4 years to a track and field athletic center. First 2 times, later 4 times a week. Hard practicing. My specialty was long jump. In 6th grade, my ambitious target was to jump 5 meters. My coach, though my coach of course wanted me to get there, he was doubtful. He said it wasn't possible for me to jump 5 meters because I was too short. I had to grow a little first and would be ready for it maybe the next year. But my parents believed in their boy, even encouraged him. They said, "Andy, you jump 5 meters this year. We're going to buy you a road bike." And the road bike was the thing little Andy wanted most at that time. So at the next regional championships in track and field, I not just defended my title, but exceeded the 5 meters by 2 centimeters, got my road bike, and proved coach wrong. In addition, the 5 meters 2 I had jumped marked a new record for my age group. My coach was so impressed by this that he recommended I go to a trial session to one of these sports schools in East Germany. And it was there where I experienced for the first time in my life true racism. I mean, I heard them all before, let's call it unfriendly remarks about my skin color, but they usually came from unimportant people who didn't really count, or as my parents called them, stupid, ignorant persons. But this time they came from a sort of official, a referee. During the trial session, I overheard him say really nasty things about me. He suggested to ship the Negro back to Africa where he belonged to, ask stupid questions like, what business does the Negro have to do here anyway? Or is this an international competition here? And so on. All this put me totally off my stride. A few weeks before, I had jumped 5 meters. There I couldn't even make 450. That day, I didn't reach more than 75% of my capability. And of course, failed the trial session, or the trial. Yeah, I think there are milestones in every life. Certain events you always remember because they had an impact. And I'm sure this incident in Frankfurt upon Oder marked a milestone in my life. You know, all I ever wanted was to be a normal guy who stood out only because of his achievements. Not because of his skin color. And all I ever wanted was no rubbernecking when I showed somewhere, not being called foreigner, Negro, or even nigger. And yeah, I think I'm stuck. Yes. I want to live in a place where people respected me, and anyway where I didn't stuck out. I think I'm stuck. Sorry for a second. Ah, I got it. All I ever wanted was no astonished faces when I started to speak in my mother tongue, German. Okay? I wanted to live someplace where I fit in, not more and not less. And I realized this would never be possible in East Germany. At that time, I didn't think in political categories. It wasn't about communism or capitalism. I was just a kid, and I knew I didn't want to live there anymore. Okay, a second episode from my life now. The other day, my friends and I celebrated something not quite usual. It was the 20th anniversary of my release from prison. It was a brilliant day. We barbecued in our garden, had a real good time. And after I had read a short story from my latest script, my neighbor Susan said, "Andre, you must be really happy now, because everything you ever wanted, you have achieved. Especially, in the first place, your freedom." Then she looked at my wife and said, "You've got such a wonderful wife." She looked around and said, "You've got such a wonderful, beautiful home." And then she held up my book and said, "And you have published your story." You know what I thought? Damn right, because I made it happen. So I'm going to tell you now what happened in the almost 40 years between the two incidents I just told you about. I'm going to tell you how the little thing grew, how I made my dream become true. You've heard two anecdotes from my life now, but you may ask yourself, who is this guy anyway? In order to answer this question, I would like to introduce myself. My name is André Baganz. I was born in 1961 in East Berlin, 3 months before the construction of the wall. The wall that separated not just Germany, but also Europe for almost a half century. My mother was German. My biological father came from Africa. He was only for the time of his apprenticeship in East Germany. After that, he was required to leave. Since there were hardly any foreigners in sealed-off communist East Germany, I stuck out there like a sore thumb. My mother was a teacher, Russian and English, and she got married to a colleague of hers when I was 3 years old. This man adopted me, gave me his name, and treated me all my life like his own flesh and blood. And I got 2 younger brothers. The greater part of my childhood and youth, I lived in a small secluded village near Berlin. Everything was fine there because everybody knew me. They didn't see my skin color anymore. My wife once asked my brother René, "When did you notice for the first time that André was black?" His astonished answer was, "Never." But as soon as I left this sheltered area, I felt myself exposed to everyday racism. I'm not blaming anybody, I'm just saying I had to deal with this problem, and it was a huge one for me. At the age of 20, I put in a request to leave the country, which was turned down. Maybe I should explain that East German citizens were not allowed to travel to the West. Even applying put you on a suspect list. But I wasn't going to put up with that. I was so fed up with my situation there that I tried to escape. Since East Germans were allowed to travel to the Czech Republic, or at that time Czechoslovakia, I tried there to cross the border to West Germany. When I got busted by the Czechs, I told them the story that I was a tourist who had lost his way, and they bought it. They sent me back to Germany, but put a notation in my passport, so that from then on, every official could see immediately that I was a suspect for defection. The second time, I tried the Berlin Wall, but I had to abort the attempt. Just impossible. A couple of 100 meters no man's land, dog runs, barbed wire fences, watchtowers everywhere, and finally the huge wall. The third time, I tried it in the northwest of East Germany. This time I was arrested and couldn't talk my way out, especially since they saw the notation in my passport. They put me in jail, but I was so determined that I busted out with 3 other guys. The prison break was hardcore and very violent. We took 2 guards as hostages, and there was a big shootout, and a task force finally brought us down. The reaction of the communist state was devastating. As for me, they decided to lock me away for good. Nothing to live for anymore. Still, I refused to believe that this was the end for me. And I said to myself, Andy, you have no influence on the outside world, but you have 100% influence on yourself. So there's something you can change. Use this power. And that's what I did. After a year, when I was allowed to, I started to read books, to learn English, to prepare myself for freedom. And I started to think about myself and the world. And you know, if there's one good thing about solitary, it's the fact that you have enough time to think. Still, though I always tried to be strong, I was so many times on the verge of breakdown. In those weak moments, I had only one wish, to be dead, so that all the suffering would be over. Every morning, when I woke up, I hated myself for still being alive. But somehow, I hung on, dragged myself from day to day, week to week, month to month, and year to year. And as you see, it was worth it, because if I had given up then, I wouldn't be standing here now. And there was one man I believed in, who gave me enormous strength to pull through. The 1980 US presidential election was the first one I really followed. Because there was a candidate who made it his major task, to fight and destroy the Soviet Union, or as he called it later, the evil empire that denied freedom to millions of people in Central and Eastern Europe. This candidate won the election and became president of the United States. My calculation was, when he succeeds and destroys the Soviet Union, it'll be my ticket to freedom, the one and only thing I wanted. This great man kept his promise, and I think of Ronald Reagan at least once a year, because he had the same birthday as my oldest daughter. Anyway, after 5 years, I got my first reward for not giving up. My solitary ended. And after 5 more years, I got fully rewarded because the evil empire had collapsed and I was released. That happened one day before my 30th birthday. So I was still young and had time on my side. Years later, I returned to Bautzen II, which is a museum now. And I took my nephew Max with me. He hadn't been born yet, not even thought of when his uncle was in Bautzen II. And when I saw my old cell, 132, I asked Max to lock me in there for a couple of minutes. And sitting there on my old screwed-on stool, it all came back to me. Me, wandering 3.5 steps to and fro for hours in this little cell. And I couldn't comprehend dreaming of the sweet thing called freedom. And I couldn't comprehend that I had spent 5 years of solitary confinement within these grey walls. I thought that must have been a different person, because I was sure I wouldn't bear 5 minutes in there. But then I thought, no, you would, because you're still the same guy. You're the one for whom giving up had never been an option, and never will. And tears of joy filled my eyes and ran down my cheeks. And I was seized by pride, because I was the one who had kept holding on to his dream, who had never let himself go. You know, there are so many people who complain about things, but they are not willing to do or risk anything to change them. I was different. I was only 20 years old when I was willing to risk my life for my freedom. And a certain incident with 2 Stasi guys back in '83 came into my mind. After I had said, your damn state is on the way out, and when it's gone, we will get even. They burst out laughing. And then they said, let's see who outlives who. You, the German Democratic Republic, or vice versa. Looks like the communists and the so-called German Democratic Republic lost, big time. Because they are long gone, and I'm still around. Anyway, when Max let me out again, I felt proud of myself, and somewhat charged with new energy. Because over the years, I had forgotten about the price I had to pay for my freedom. Root of the matter is, from little things, big things grow, means no more than if you have a dream, hang on to it. Make it become true, even if you suffer so many setbacks. If you pull through, you will always be on the winning side. That may sound corny, and you may say, man, I've heard this so many times before. But you've heard it so many times because it is the simple truth. And before I close, one last tip. If you ever lose heart and want to quit, take a time out, take a rain check, and postpone quitting until tomorrow. Because tomorrow, things will look different. You will have new strength and energy to carry on. That's what I did all the time, and it worked. Thanks for listening.